You know, the title of this show is really annoying for the purposes of internet searching. From. Might as well call it where, or who, or it. Oh. Greetings, you absolute peasants! 'Tis I, Lord Carbonac Token Lace Wallace Ingrate Billingshurst IV. No need to bow. And today we shall peruse from. From where, you ask? To where are you from? From what are you from? Are you from? All this and more we shall endeavour not to answer. Renewed for its third series, From throws us into the life and death struggles of a group of ordinary travellers, trapped together in a town from which they cannot escape. Located somewhere in a fog-filled, forested backwater of pseudo-Maine, this is the most non-Stephen King-esque show since the first series of Stranger Things. Open up any Stephen King book at any page and there's a 70% chance he's describing this place. And something weird is going on in Castle Rock, from, either in groups or just one by one, unwitting travellers keep arriving in the town, I don't believe it's ever named, driving through it in their own vehicles, coming from all over America, the never boot Canada, wherever it was they had once been, each of them shares the same experience. The forest on the road closes in about them, a fallen tree blocks their path, and then their fate is sealed. Returning back along the road, there is only the town. Dilapidated, wrecks of cars and trucks littering the streets, the houses falling apart, the slack-jawed peasants staring troglodytically at the new arrivals as they drive past. It's like going to Bradford! The newcomers head out back along the other road, but sure enough, after a few minutes, that same fallen tree blocks their path, like some giant Mobius strip. So back to town they go. Can you just imagine the fear these people are experiencing? Warm urine would be streaming down anyone's leg if they thought they were trapped in Bradford for the rest of their lives. As for the tree, whether they can walk or drive round it, chainsaw it, or otherwise pull it out of the way, these ideas never seem to occur to anyone from the town. Anyhow, trapped as they are, they're stuck with everyone else in this place, people who have been there for days, for weeks, years, and in a few small cases, decades. And it's only then that they realise that this isn't the worst of their problems, not even close. For come the onset of night, what Game of Thrones would describe as the others arrive. Humanesque, but not quite human. These nightmarish creatures wander the town throughout the moonlight hours. Oddly pallid and garbed in vintage clothing, a 50s milkman, a nurse from the days of yore, a cowpoke. They wander, searching, seeking, calling out and hunting down any strangers that they can find, and when they catch them, the transformation that undertakes these beings is brutal, violent, and oh so lethal. By Jove, this really is like Bradford. Though a mixture of ragtag people trapped in a location they cannot escape from is hardly an original concept, it holds as an idea, and I myself have always found it an intriguing possibility. It makes one ponder what one would do if one was inserted into such a situation. I've concluded I would last in From for at least 3 nights, feeding the nightmare creatures my butler, valet and maid each evening in turn. No one cheater! I said no passport this year! And you should be happy I'm giving you up last!
Usted es muy amable, señor.
Again, there are all the usual tropes of people behaving dumbly, people doing or not doing things you yourself would never do in such a situation, and Colony House seems to always have an endless supply of bedrooms on demand. But these misgivings are comparatively small and never enough to completely destroy the enjoyment of the theatre. My greatest criticism of the show is its over-reliance on J.J. Abrams-esque mystery boxes. This worked very well in the earlier days of Lost, and works initially here. You are never quite sure if this is a supernatural place, some purgatory of coma patients from various car crashes, or indeed something else. But much like Lost, I was not very far into the show before I wondered if the explanation of all this madness, would A. never be given, B. not make any sense if it was given, or far, far, far more likely, C. just be a complete letdown. The first series avoids this well enough. The show is still relatively fresh after all. However, by the end of Series 2, the mystery box phenomenon is starting to wear a little thin, And particularly in the climax of the series, where possible explanation is given to the nature of the place they inhabit, you can see which way the show may be about to go. By the third series, whilst there are some revelations, it needs more. I suspect they are going to keep From running for 2 or 3 more series at a minimum, but I promise you it will be a much better result if it decided a 4th and final series would be wrapping it all up. The show is still watchable, but there's only so many times you can listen to bleached ghost children call out, "Inkui! Inkui!" before you want some hard answers. The tone of From's titles is pitched perfectly. A creepy rendition of Que Sera Sera sounds out as images of dilapidated houses are shown one after the other, interspersed with a child's crayon drawings, the drawings becoming increasingly dark and macabre as the titles scroll past. Incidentally, when I was just a boy, I asked my mother, what will I be? Will I be famous? Will I be rich? Here's what she said to me. No. Well, look at me now, Mama. Look at me now. Look at me now. Oh, Mama. Oh, Mama. Oh, Mama. Oh, Mama. Oh, Mama. Harold Perrineau, yes, of lost fame, is charismatic and solid as Boyd, the increasingly beleaguered self-imposed sheriff of From. A man who wants to do the right thing but is thrown into situations where he increasingly has to do the bad ones. And Elizabeth Saunders, David Alpay and AJ Simmons in particular give strong supporting performances. But the star of the show, in my opinion, is Scott McCord's tortured and childlike Victor. A man now in his 50s, half-driven mad, having eked a living in the town of From ever since he was a child. McCord juggles well a difficult mix of naivety, unlearnedness, sensitivity, anguish, and a secret knowledge of the workings of the world in the fragile and just slightly slow Victor. And though sometimes the scenes can be frustrating to watch as a viewer, you cannot help to like this man, whose life was essentially stolen from him. Simon Webster, the youngest of the main cast, too gives a worthy performance for a child actor, but his in-world mother, Colombian actress Catalina Sandino Moreno, is more disappointing. Possessing a more limited acting range, Moreno is cast here as the accented wife of Jim. The accent is not an issue, it's mild but there, but the show for some reason never references it. Personally, I think the smart choice would have been to have lent into her exoticism. I spent the first 2 series thinking she was French for God's sakes, and whoever would want you to think that of them? But From passes up on that chance with nary a word said, naming her character as Tabitha, and heavily implying that this oddly accented woman is as American as her husband Jim. It is Tabitha's little family unit, headed by Jim Matthews, that is initially the family who lead us into the world of From. Although the show diversifies out into an increasingly ensemble cast, it sets up both Jim and Sheriff Boyd to be the 2 main characters, yet at times seems that it cannot decide who it actually wants its lead to be, switching focus back and forth between the 2. Boyd is the more interesting of the pair, with a dark and brutal backstory, but it also has to be said that of Jim, he is unnecessarily aggressive, bullish, and prone to violent outbursts. He and his wife are in the middle of a divorce, and while his hair-trigger temper might be relatively realistic for such a man in his position, the result for the viewer is a character who is not entirely likeable, and a greater focus on Perrineau's Boyd is the better choice, a choice the show eventually seems to settle on. Though as the show progresses, the people of From discover hints of even worse things out in the forest, various mystery boxes suggesting at some and fully hiding others away. The nocturnal vampiric demon creatures is where the show really shines, wandering slowly but purposefully throughout the settlement like zombie Milky Bar kids, a fixed uncanny valley of a Richter set upon their faces. The creatures are a nocturnal ticking clock, counting down to the death of the next inhabitant they can get their hands on. These things can speak, can hold conversation, and are even capable of trickery, attempting to negotiate their way into the strongholds of each of From's inhabitants. They are the driving force behind many of the show's episodes, and I won't deny gaining a certain masochistic satisfaction watching newcomers come into the town, not believe the reality, and then be slaughtered in grotesque and wonderful ways. Worthy of a 1980s Cenobite.
Taste our pleasures.
Indeed, the being From uses on one of its posters, simply named Nightmare Creature or Smiley, in particular seems to enjoy playing his part, the actor looking oddly like Jack Nicholson's Joker.
I like him already.
Smiley proves an especially entertaining antagonist, and it is a shame when his character is, at least temporarily, removed from the show. So, if your like From is really a tricky call to make. There are so many subgenres of horror. There's slasher horror, body horror, psychological horror, supernatural horror, serial killer horror, gore porn horror. Okay, maybe not gore porn horror, but I wish there was. So it's down to each individual to decide whether or not this is their cup of tea. The good thing is you'll be able to tell relatively quickly if this is for you. And so if you haven't watched it yet, why not give From a go? So far, the show still appeals to me. I mean, I know what it's like being in a place like this. I've been to Wales.